Welcome to the League of Women Voters series on climate change preparedness and resilience. Protecting the environment and building a strong economy are paramount goals in the 21st century, which require the fusing of climate resilience and adaptation practices with investment decisions. This presentation will focus on the emerging research and the known practices for financing climate resilience and adaptation, placing an economic lens on global practices. Financed institutions around the world are funding climate adaptation projects. They are lowering carbon emissions, developing large-scale energy storage batteries, and managing forest sustainability and reforestation. Institutions like the World Bank Group have ambitious goals to transform the global economy with climate-smart solutions. Government, industry, business, finance, and technology must lead the way. In the near future, governments in every corner of the world, including the United States, will have to allocate extraordinary sums of money to cope with climate disasters and to build climate resilience. The United States needs to raise between 0.67% and 1.25% of their gross domestic product on resilience. Globally, this amounts to hundreds of billions of dollars per year. Climate experts assert that countries globally are currently underspending on climate resilience by as much as 70%. Overpopulation is compounding the issue of funding climate resilience. According to the United Nations, the world's population is projected to increase by 2 billion persons by 2050, increasing from 7.7 billion to 9.7 billion. 9 countries will make up the projected growth. They are India, Pakistan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, the United Republic of Tanzania, Indonesia, Egypt, and the United States of America. Around 2027, India is expected to overtake China as the world's most populous country, whereas China is projected to decline by 31.4 million by 2050. In 2013, at the World Economic Forum, climate change, coupled with rising population growth, was deemed to be one of the top global risks faced by mankind. The Forum's Global Risk 2013 report, created by the Green Growth Action Alliance, prioritized 3 areas. The first priority is coping with the emerging scarcity of resources, such as water, food, and energy. Secondly, mitigating the risks of climate change. And lastly, keeping environmental damage and destabilization in check. At the 2012 G20 Summit in Los Cabos, the Green Growth Action Alliance was created. The alliance is a partnership between the public and private sectors, initiated to increase private investment in green sectors like renewable energy, clean transportation, and sustainable agriculture. The membership includes corporations, public finance institutions, and private capital providers and think tanks. The Green Growth Action Alliance serves as an example of what is termed international climate finance, the shifting of capital from developed countries to developing countries for climate mitigation and adaptation activities, such as building solar power plants and walls to protect from sea level rise. 2 distinct pots of money come into play: private and public finance. Public money can provide the seed money to incentivize private investment. Public and private funding should work hand in hand. In the global arena of climate finance, there is a philosophical premise that the developed countries have an obligation to help developing countries and must pledge money. In 2015, the Paris Agreement strengthened the global framework to assist countries in paying for the cutting of emissions and the strengthening of resilience. The central injustice which drove this decision was that the countries least capable of coping with climate change impacts were the least responsible in causing the problem. The $5.7 trillion needed to fund climate adaptation, projected internationally, will, however, require money generated from both the private and public sector. The pots of money are different, but the goal is for the sectors to work in tandem. It can be a win-win situation. In 2017, Fiji, a small island developing state, created a tax structure to fund climate resilience. Funds from developed countries have been helpful, but have fallen short to address the climate crisis in Fiji. Thus, Fiji has acted aggressively in passing a 10% tax, or a levy, on plastic bags used for restaurant takeout, on luxury items such as vehicles and yachts, and also taxing their vast tourist service industry. Since 2017, Fiji has funded 56 projects with 120 Fijian dollars, which is approximately 60 million US dollars. I'd like to read to you Fiji's impressive mission statement. We Fijians are determined to build an inclusive, prosperous, resilient, and low-carbon future for ourselves, and remain steadfast in the battle against climate change, the single greatest threat to our future. We aspire to achieve sustainable socioeconomic development that preserves our unique and pristine biodiversity, enabling our people to pass on our worthy inheritance of environmental stewardship for future generations. Let us now look at the banking industry with low-interest loans and job creation in developing countries. Green growth means green investment aimed at economic growth while reducing greenhouse gas emissions, minimizing waste, and conserving natural resources. Due to the strain of public budgets, large-scale private investing is deemed necessary via two methods: green bonds and green banks. The vital government role will be to create policies and regulations to mobilize private finance and investment in support of green growth. Countries and communities will be spending initially. However, money can be recouped on a global scale. South Korea was the first country globally to make green growth a national strategy, entitled the 2008 South Korea Green Growth Strategy. Green banking has entered the scene to leverage the limited availability of public funds available for climate change finance and to convert smaller amounts of public funding into much larger pools of private capital. A bank, such as the World Bank, can issue green bonds for an emerging group of green investors and has done so successfully since 2009. All green banks have the mission to address climate change, though many also have additional objectives, such as improving resiliency or serving low-income communities. Green bonds are bonds with tax exemptions to enhance their attractiveness to investors. They raise money for environmental projects such as energy efficiency, pollution prevention, sustainable agriculture, fishery and forestry, the protection of aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems, clean transportation, clean water, and sustainable water management. In addition, they also finance innovative climate technologies and the mitigation of climate change. The 36.2 billion green bond market in China accounted for 39% of all global issuance of green bonds in 2016 and was mainly driven by commercial banks. The World Bank and the European Investment Bank initially started issuing green bonds between 2007 and 2008. Private sector's issuers, including corporate and commercial banks, started issuing their bonds in 2013. Around $157 billion worth of green bonds were issued in 2019. The World Bank is comprised of funding from 189 countries with the mission of working to alleviate poverty and to create sustainable growth in developing countries. As one example of international funding, let us look at the World Bank Climate Change Fund Management Unit, which holds $5 billion in capital to assist countries in establishing economic growth through creating jobs through climate-related projects. It is projected that the investment in resilient infrastructure in developing countries could deliver $4.2 trillion over the lifetime of the investments. An investment of $1 on average is projected to yield approximately $4 in benefits. Infrastructure must be made more resilient in order to avoid costly recovery efforts from the consequences of natural disasters, as well as to secure the livelihoods and health of people. Shifting to low-carbon, resilient economies could create over 65 million new jobs globally by 2030. Since 1947, the World Bank has funded over 12,000 development projects via traditional loans, interest-free credits, and grants. Resources abound on the topic of climate finance. Thank you for participating in the League of Women Voters series on climate change preparedness and resilience. We encourage you to watch Part 2 on financing climate change resilience, a national perspective.